Hi, my name is Karyn Kuniyuki. I am a Texas certified educator. I'm also a member of the Texas Art Education Association. I live and work in San Angelo, Texas, and I teach art and Lego robotics for the Emmanuel School of Fine Arts, where I am also the director of that program. The Emmanuel School of Fine Arts provides art, robotics, and music programs to students regardless of their socioeconomic status. I'm here today because I think that art is a really important building block for children to expand their creative thinking skills. Skills that are necessary to solve complex engineering, science, and math problems. Creative thinking skills teach children to think outside of the box and to explore different, non-traditional paths to a solution. So today I am going to highlight for you a few of my favorite STEAM-based art lessons. These particular lessons, they incorporate robotics, making mathematic calculations, technology, and then some chemistry experiments. So even if you're not an art teacher, these projects might open the door for you to explore some cross-curricular ideas. You might even find yourself pairing up with a colleague, maybe, and looking at the curriculum that you already teach and seeing where some of these ideas might be able to give you an alternative, engaging activity for your students. What I'm not going to do today is I'm not going to articulate how each activity meets the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. But I will be highlighting the skills and practical applications for each activity as they relate to STEAM education. I'll also note that I adapt each of these lessons for a very wide range of students since I do teach kids that are between kindergarten and 12th grade. So typically when I plan a lesson, I will introduce a lesson to all of my kids, whether they're in kindergarten or the 8th grade. They're gonna be studying the same topic. I will adjust that topic and the project based on their skill level, their age, and what's appropriate for them to learn at that time. You're gonna be pretty surprised by what some of my younger students are able to achieve. So let's dig in. I've got 4 projects in mind, and let's hit the road. The first lesson is a spin-off from a basic block printing activity where students learn about radial symmetry. In the study of visual arts, we often use this kind of lesson to teach the difference between lateral symmetry and radial symmetry. It's also a great lesson to focus on the principles of repetition, pattern, and contrast. First, the students use crayon or oil pastel to create a very colorful, abstract background. Second, the student designs a foam printing plate using either embossing techniques or a regular pencil and a ruler or some shapes to trace. They can also freehand draw. Third, the students roll ink onto their printing plate and they transfer the image on top of their background. I have the students practice on scrap paper to define what their larger design will be. Their foam printing plate is essentially a tile, and they are learning how to create patterns and repetition with that tile. The same plate is printed repeatedly until the page is full, with careful consideration of the plate's rotation and placement to achieve a more complex pattern. Block printing is a hands-on way of studying and understanding tessellations, a topic in geometry that studies how shapes, known as tiles, can be arranged to fill a plane without any gaps, according to a given set of rules. Don't underestimate the value of using rulers and measurements to decide the size of the printing block and how that will evenly fill the paper. For example, my printing blocks were 4 inches by 4 inches, and the paper on which the students worked was 16 inches by 20 inches, requiring each student to print their block a total of 20 times. And each student had to calculate exactly that. I had them measure their foam printing plate, I had them measure their paper, and they were determining how many times they were going to have to print their block. My youngest students, like kindergarten, first, second grade, they receive a paper with a grid already drawn for them. And my older students use the rulers and create their own guidelines and grids. This seems excessive at first because printing something 20 times is a lot, but in order to reveal the larger pattern, it is necessary. And the work does move along pretty quickly. Once the kids get the hang of block printing, it is very easy, and they appreciate getting to try it more than a couple of times. Other applications and connections for this project might be the following. Decorative tiling in architecture, such as Moorish wall tilings in Islamic architecture, and strap work and xylage tiles in Alhambra, Spain. Another application would be tessellations used in the manufacturing world to reduce the waste of materials, like when you cut sheet metal for objects like car doors, or if you cut sheet metal for soda cans. That is done very carefully to minimize waste. Another application would be the studies of earth science, showing honeycomb as a well-known example of a tessellation that occurs in nature and focusing on its hexagonal shape. There are all kinds of tessellations and naturally forming phenomenon in nature, such as the rare sedimentary rock formations in Tasman Peninsula, that's in Tasmania. The sedimentary rock fractures into perfect rectangular blocks. This could also lead to the study of fractals, otherwise described as never-ending patterns. Just one word to the wise about this project. Avoid the use of numbers and letters unless you also plan to teach positive versus negative printing aspects, because these design elements will print backwards on paper. For this project, I use the oil pastels, and then I use a water-based printing ink. You have to have some kind of bench hook to roll the ink out on, and I also use a brayer to roll the ink out. This is best done in an art classroom. It's a pretty messy project. If you are doing it in another classroom and you want to simplify the project, you could always skip the background part because using oil pastel and crayon has a waxy surface. So if you skip that part and just use a foam plate, have your students create a design on the foam plate, and then you can use regular Crayola markers to color the foam plate. And while that's happening, if you have a damp paper towel resting on the paper that they're going to print on, that creates a little bit of dampness on the paper surface. When they take their foam plate that's fully covered with like a Crayola water-based marker, and then they flip that upside down onto their damp paper and rub firmly with their hand, that image will transfer. And so they can achieve the same principle, they can repeat the process, they can twist and turn their foam plate. As long as they stick with the same colors, they will achieve the same criteria for the lesson, and they'll learn about tiling and tessellations. It would just be less mess. I do think that using a watercolor-based marker, it's going to take you longer. So maybe you want to make the project a little bit smaller in scale, but it will be overall less messy and wouldn't require as much cleanup as using a water-based ink and block printing in that style. Once your printing is dry, if your students are older or more advanced and you want to add another level, you could have them oil pastel on top of the dry printed part. You just cannot have a water-based marker print on top of an oil pastel. It'll just bead up and it won't dry. You can also encourage your students to use Sharpie and add some more designs and make their project more elaborate. The second lesson I want to describe found its roots in the spirograph. Do you remember that toy from the 60s? I found the directions online for building a spirograph machine out of Lego, and then wrote a lesson plan all about how different artists use spirograph concepts to create new designs. Then I created a unique artwork from the experimental designs that my machine produced. You can access these two videos from the links that I have provided to you. One video details the different artists that use spirograph concepts, and the other video is a step-by-step about how to use a Lego spirograph machine to create a new artwork. The general idea is that first, all of my students have to build a spirograph machine from Lego. Second, the students paint backgrounds on small pieces of watercolor paper using watercolor paints, or if you don't have paint, you could use water-soluble markers and then just paint brushes and water. When everything is dry, they use their machine to create designs on their decorative papers with colored pens. Lastly, I encourage them to cut their designs into shapes and piece them back together in a variety of compositions. I have them photograph their designs and create at least 4 different possibilities before gluing anything down. One of the concepts I like to use with this lesson is that when you are creating, you want to explore all of your options before committing to something. This is brainstorming in a tactile way. So if they have a lot of different pieces that they can move around and change and tinker with the colors that they're playing with and the formations that they put down, that's teaching them to look for a variety of possibilities instead of having one idea and committing solely to that idea and not thinking about any other options. From an artistic standpoint, this kind of project increases fine motor skills. Everything from the dexterity required for building with Lego to the concentration it requires to hand crank the mechanism and achieve a nice, even flow of the pen over the paper. When engaging in expressive and creative arts, children develop better hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills. What physical exercise does for large motor skills, art activities can do for the more intricate and fine motor skills that are necessary in all aspects of life, from handwriting to the wiring of a complicated robot. Going forward, I will have my K-8 students practice building the Lego spirograph. Just the act of following the directions for the build is a great way to understand how gears and axles work together to generate motion. I require them to build a hand crank, and once they have achieved that, I allow them to exchange the hand crank for a small motor. Hand cranking a spirograph design can take a very long time, and the longer they're hand cranking, the higher the probability that they're going to make a mistake and they're going to want to start over. So I do allow them to substitute a small motor if they have it and use that for a continuity in their design. My oldest students will be challenged to create their own machine in the way that Robert Balk works. Robert Balk is one of the artists that I feature in my lesson. Robert doesn't work with Lego. He uses all different kinds of materials and metals. So these machines that the older students make, they can be made out of recycled materials, and they have the potential to be powered by hand, by motor, by bicycle, by hamster wheel. The possibilities are endless. The reason I like Robert Balk's design so much is that his machine can be altered in the middle of creation by rotating various dials. And this means he can achieve a truly unique design every time he makes artwork. So with that in mind, the Lego spirograph has 6 different attributes that you can adjust that will alter the design. Have the students hypothesize what will happen with each alteration. Have them calculate the reach of the arm when the adjustments are made. Once the initial build is made and explored, challenge the students to alter their design based on a goal that they want to achieve, such as using larger pieces of paper or holding more than one color pen at the same time. Other applications and connections for this activity might include the following: exploring CNC machines, promote discussions about product assembly and how manufacturing uses technology to replicate certain tasks. Why is it important to be able to replicate a specific function? The resulting art project could be a collaboration, one where the designs that the students produce can come together in one large-scale display. You could incorporate the studying of kinematic models. It could also be a precursor to computer-aided design or CAD programs. The third lesson I want to share is really not so much a lesson as an idea with endless opportunity. But for this idea, you will need access to a laser cutting and engraving machine such as a Glowforge or an Epilog laser. We are blessed to have 2 of these in our STEAM Central at the Tom Green County Library downtown, in addition to a CNC router. You may have to hunt for this resource in your own community. An Epilog laser will cut paper, cardboard, and thin wood, among a variety of other materials. It will also engrave plexiglass and erasers, regular glass, metals. You create the file and then you use the computer to direct the laser for cutting and engraving. The library holds free classes to be able to use these machines. A CNC router will do some of the same work, especially the cutting and carving. Or instead of cutting material away to create your design, you could use a 3D printer to build up a design in a similar way. Here are some projects that I think would make good use of this technology. Woodblock or linocut printmaking. The standard tools for woodblock and linoleum printing are very sharp and one of the greatest hazards in an art classroom. They can also be tiring to use and physically challenging. By digitally carving the designs, you can eliminate some of the danger, as well as make your content accessible to all students, whether they might have physical limitations or if you're restricted by the age of the students that you teach. Here's an example of a multicolor woodblock print that I am personally working on. Each color in the print has its own block, so there are 6 blocks in the print total. My design is very intricate, much more intricate than I would expect from a student. It came from a photograph that I took in Kyoto, Japan. I created each layer in Photoshop and then I had them engraved using the epilogue laser. And then I ink and print them in my home studio. So each block gets inked and printed onto the same piece of paper, creating a multicolor woodblock print. We have a very cool Texas artist named Daryl Howard, who is living and working in Austin, Texas, and she uses the CNC router to cut her woodblock prints. Her work is heavily influenced by her time living in Japan, and she was actually able to apprentice under a master printmaker in Japan. She uses the traditional Japanese style of printing, and she creates stunning Texas landscapes. Another idea is to create cut paper shadow boxes, or dioramas. This particular design was made for an ELA assignment where the student had to create a diorama based on the book called The Librarian of Auschwitz. It was about World War II. The student used Photoshop to render black and white silhouettes of what he felt were the most important and most recognizable elements from the book. He has a gate leading into Auschwitz with the words Arbeit macht frei, the tree-lined streets of the camp, and a small girl sitting atop a stack of books. Traditionally, this student would have had to use an X-Acto blade to cut out the silhouettes, but with the use of a laser, he was able to achieve much more detail and cut more layers in the time that he was allotted to work on the project. Dioramas of this nature can be used for any subject: science, history, social studies. Designing a 3-dimensional structure or sculpture is another possibility. Think about how dollhouses are designed and built. Heck, think about the company Tinker, who will mail you a project for your child to assemble at home. This is exactly how those projects are designed and cut, usually from balsa wood. Last year, my son got a 3-dimensional cow puzzle from Chick-fil-A, which made me immediately think of using the epilogue laser to create custom builds in this way. I anticipate showing the students the original toy and how it's constructed, and then have them design their own template with specific criteria and have them create their own 3-dimensional self-standing puzzle. You could also custom design puzzles for an escape room. Say your history class is studying the tombs of the great kings of Egypt. Now the class must collaborate to design an escape room with riddles, puzzles, and interlocking pieces based on the material and the content that they have been learning in class. A couple other ideas, designing and manufacturing a product with customized packaging. That can be done with an epilogue laser or a CNC machine. And think about all the kids, the students that we saw step up to the plate and design and produce those mask holders for healthcare workers when COVID-19 increased the demand for a product that everyone desperately needed. My last project is a digital photography project using a cell phone and some very simple chemical reactions. I've actually used this activity as a way of generating interesting abstract backgrounds for other projects, such as the block printing assignment that I talked about very first in this video. I was inspired to create this lesson and activity when my 4th grader came home very excited about something he had seen done with an Alka-Seltzer tablet. The general idea is that you put water in a glass with vegetable oil and a few drops of food coloring. I like to use colors that will lead to a discussion about color theory, because I'm an art teacher, such as yellow and blue drops, because after a couple of minutes they combine to make green. When you drop the Alka-Seltzer tablet into the glass, the bubbles released from the tablet create movement in the glass, and it sort of looks like a lava lamp moving around the blobs of food coloring. At this point, you could have the glass near a window or supply the kids with a flashlight to shine through the glass. You want to have a quality light source to make your photography look really great. We also turned the lights off and only used the flashlight for some of the pictures. Now is time to let the picture taking commence. I make sure to talk about how to focus the camera, and I also touch on focal distance. If the camera is too close to the subject, it won't focus at all. But you can move back from the subject and then later crop in to get those really close, interesting compositions in the editing phase. My alma mater, RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology in New York, has a degree program in photographic sciences where photography is used to advance science and imaging is used to collect scientific data. Students there, they integrate complementary studies that might include imaging science, information technology, computer science, optics, and biology to solve imaging problems and advance photographic technology. So, using digital photography in a chemistry class or a science class, that can lead to professions down the road. That shows that we're using photography in science all the time. What STEAM education does is marry the two fields together to create a multidisciplinary approach to technology development, robotics, industrial design, engineering, and so much more. The art in STEAM represents visual arts, but also social studies, history, physical arts, performance arts, and music. Art is about using creativity and imagination to increase the development of the STEM essential skills. It enhances flexibility, it makes our students adaptable, it increases productivity, creates engagement, promotes responsibility, and what I think is most important is it promotes innovation. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that the content I presented was helpful. If you have additional questions, or if you need clarification on something, or if you need to generate some more ideas for your specific subject matter, please feel free to contact me. I can be reached at Karyn@emmanuel-sa.org. Thank you.